I'm Ben. I like to draw, paint, and sculpt, particularly in this sort of stylized way. And today I thought it would be fun just to hang out, answer questions while I stylize some portraits. I like stylized stuff. So we're going to use reference, and I'll show you situations where I'll stick closer to the reference and situations where I'll just sort of completely not even look at the reference sometimes. So let's start with this lady here, right? So what I want to do, just start with the largest shapes possible. So the name of the game here, largest shapes to smallest shapes, okay? It's gonna look funky in the beginning. It's just the way it goes. One thing I want to talk about is the way I think about the process. So I kind of think of it like on a kind of spectrum or a sliding scale. So you've got like the 2D thinking, right? So these shapes are very two-dimensional. They're not really like three-dimensional at the moment. You could really just cut these out of pieces of paper and do the same thing and just lay them over the top of each other. But I like to go between 2D thinking and 3D thinking, but not linearly. So I'll sort of go back and forth between this kind of slider as I go. For example, if I want to take this 2D shape and bring it into the 3D world, I could do something like this. Now we're starting to understand the forms of the face. We're starting to add in some 3D shapes within those 2D shapes. And I'm going to do the process of sketching, knocking it back. So meaning I'm going to reduce the opacity, go over the top, reduce the opacity, and just keep going and having fun with it that way. When I'm drawing heads, I like to have a bit of an understanding of the skull underneath. Do we have the shortcut still? The flip shortcut. So this really helps me out a lot as well. When I'm drawing, painting, doing whatever, getting a different perspective. And I'm not going for likeness here. I'm just going for a bit of fun, a bit of stylization, just giving it a whirl. All right, and the hair here as well is just big basic shapes. Really no detail. Now, again, it's gonna look weird to begin with. So at this stage, I might even come through, knock down the opacity, add a new layer, do the old flip, and let's start to understand where these eyes are going to sit within the socket.
I tend to struggle with the nose because there's like small planes underneath like the bottom. So like, what is some tips advice for tackling on that?
I like to think of the nose in simplified terms with this kind of shape. Thinking about the center line with all of these shapes really helps me a lot. So I'm trying to find the center line of everything. So if you can start to find the center line of the nose and think of it almost like a pyramid, then that is kind of what I'm thinking about. When I'm looking at time lapses of other artists and that kind of thing, it kind of looks like it just like and it's done. If I post a time lapse, you can sometimes maybe think that about my stuff that I'm putting out there. But what I'm thinking about isn't necessarily what I'm putting down on paper. So you got to keep that into account as well. And now the whole thing about these simplified shapes that I'm putting down, we're inventing them. I'm not copying the reference one-to-one. I'm not going through and looking at every little bump and detail here. I'm adjusting as I go. I'm trying to understand these shapes. But this is how I like to think about drawing. I'm building the drawing as I go. I'm not just going for it. I didn't have this in my head before I drew this. I'm kind of building it up as I go. A quick little tip with the ears. For those of you that are familiar with my streams, I like to do the simplified little backward 6 or a forward 6. The ears are fantastic as well. The ears are so good for giving the head direction. For example, if I wanted to do one that's a little bit more on the profile, like a little bit turning towards the profile view, just throwing that ear in there helps out a ton. We're doing the full profile view, putting the ear on the side, automatically gives it direction. So the ears, for me, are so useful. Even the eyes. The eyes, I think of them in the sockets. They're within the sockets, the eyebrows, they're wrapping around this sort of 3 dimensions of the head. This little line here is one of my favorites for getting the direction and the dimension of the face, is this brow to eye socket down to the cheek. This is super helpful, particularly if you're going ahead and going to start to paint and add values, because now we've got planes. We've got this plane, we've got this plane. We've got this plane here, we've got this plane. There's a lot of information that we've just gathered from that really simplified, just that little line there. One of my favorites as well.
Do you prefer referencing from 2D images or from life?
Both. I don't see a reason why you would do one over the other. You get a different perspective definitely doing it from life.
And how did the outcomes of your drawings differ between the two types of referencing?
I think for me, when drawing from 2 dimensions, like a photo, you have to, again, it depends on your end goal. You have to really understand what's going on because the camera can kind of do tricks on you. So like the light can kind of go a weird way and you might want to make an artistic choice to emphasize like maybe this eye a little bit more, or the lighting was just a little bit, or this shadow just isn't quite working right. So you have to understand a little bit more and invent a little bit more on the 2D image, the photo image, versus if I'm looking at you right now, I've got a lot more information about how the light's hitting your face and your nose and all that, and the planes of the face and that kind of thing. So that's sort of how I tend to feel like it differs for me.
Do you have a shape design philosophy? What do you think about when you're simplifying these things?
Whoa, good question. I don't have anything that I'm actually going through at the moment. This has all been brought on from many artists that I follow, you know what I mean? I can't point to one in particular or 2 in particular. It's just a lot of different influences and a lot of practice. And you start, at least I have, you start to get an intuition. Now, one thing with the eye direction, one thing I love about the eye direction, so we can just undo a whole bunch of this. Let's say, for example, that I wanted her to be looking at this fly. There's a fly that's annoying her and I want her to look at that. What am I gonna do? Am I just gonna guess and like maybe get the eye direction? Like you could do that. You could sort of guesstimate your way there. I've done that many times, nothing wrong with that, but something that really helps me is if you imagine a line, so I'm thinking about these eyeballs as spheres. If you get a line directly to the object that you want them to look at, from the object to the sphere, and then you imagine a cylinder laying on that line, going straight through that cylinder. Then we're going to get rid of the rest of the cylinder. We'll do the same here. And that can start to give you a quick eye direction. So it's actually sitting in space on top of that sphere. And you got to do a bit of tweaking, you know, but it's just a quicker way for me to get some eye direction. She's kind of looking a little bit down, so I might go back and adjust it. But that is a really, really helpful way that I've found to add that eye direction. So we'll double do that as well. So we might even have her looking up a little bit further. Don't be afraid to go past that eyelid and then color in the rest of the eye. So now she's got eye direction. The eyebrows are they're like a superpower for expressions, right? The eyebrows and the lower lids, they do so much. And this is an opportunity for us to knock it back. So what I'm doing is I'm not tracing, making a final decision about the lines that I'm going to put down. So there are still a lot of decisions to be made coming through. And then we're just being a bit more careful. Again, this is still a sketch. I still want to get through a few of these. But again, always thinking in going back between the 2D and the 3D. How do they work together? Are the shapes of these eyebrows interesting enough? And do they fit in sort of 3D land? I recommend as well, when you're learning from reference or you're getting reference images, photos and that kind of thing, get style reference next to you as well. So you can start to see how different artists tackle different challenges. Like how do they do their noses? How to do their lips? Take a little bit from this artist and that artist and then mix it all together into your own thing. And that's how the style happens, you know? I've struggled with this shape here. I oftentimes do it too far out and then they look like, so their jaw would be protruding way too far out. So oftentimes I'll overcompensate, knock that jaw back, and now it kind of sits a little bit more naturally in the face there. Yeah, we can do some fun shapes for the hair. Even the hair's got direction, you know? It's got dimension, it's got shape. Got the bun in the back here. All right, and that's like a good starting point for us to then iterate and do all sorts of explorations if we want to.
Go check out Ben's course where he walks you through his illustration process. He teaches you how to exaggerate shapes, how to shade, and more at proko.com/Ben Eblen.
What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna use another bit of reference. I'm gonna go to this guy. I'll often see like big shapes to begin with. So for him, I'm seeing this square, that, and like ear. So I can kind of just get that first quick idea out of my head and onto the page. So we'll start with the square head. knock the beard out, not being too careful with anything. You don't have to be super perfectionists. Okay. All right, and I might just give him a massive neck. He's just like a huge dude now. Got our handy little backwards 6. So I'm getting, I'm seeing a triangle for the nose. I'm looking at the eyebrows. They're kind of going up crazy, so I might even push them a little bit more. I'm looking at the teeth. The overall shape of the mouth is kind of going downwards like this. Sit the eyeballs in the head somewhere.
I noticed you use the horizontal flip a lot.
Yes.
Can you talk about how that helps you? Is it for proportions?
Yeah, definitely. It really, if I just look at a drawing for long enough, I'll just stop seeing the mistakes. They'll just like melt into, and then I'll go to sleep, wake up, and I'm like, what is this?
When you're looking for big masses in the reference, do you squint your eyes?
I don't know. For values, I do, definitely. But I guess, I don't know, I've not consciously done that myself. I know I definitely do that for values. But yeah, definitely when I'm throwing values in, it's something it is a super helpful tool. Now I'm just exaggerating these teeth, you know. And the best thing about this is if you can get the shapes right, you can already start to see the character of this guy. And that's the fun part. And then you're just exploring it. You're just uncovering the different shapes. Now, what I'm looking at here is the eyes, okay? Now, the eye shape, it's gonna be, the lower lid is gonna be super important here because he's like kind of a bit of a psycho right now. So straight bottom lid, and you can already see it. That bottom lid and those eyebrows, magic. Now, he's looking off to the side. We wanna make sure that we're keeping the idea of the eyes as a sphere in our heads. So we can add that top lid. And what I might even do is make these eyebrows a little bit taller. Just go even more nuts, bring them down. And also use the lasso tool. Use the lasso tool and move stuff around. Don't be afraid to. I always used to be like, oh, I have to erase it and I have to redraw it. We're doing digital, okay? Don't use the tools at your disposal, all right? Don't be afraid to do that. So let's make this nose even bigger, you know? Like, now again, it looks funky in the beginning. It's looking a little rough, but we can refine this. We'll knock this back. And I also like to see if I can find simple shapes that I can just shade in. Because I don't know about you guys, but some of you might see line a lot easier and some of you might see value a little easier. For me, I see value a little bit easier. I can judge the shapes and the values a lot easier, like when I'm painting versus when I'm doing line. So this does help. Say if I'm just gonna put in these little abstract shapes of the mouth, I can see that a lot easier than if everything was just line. You know, then I might put some indication of the hair, like just really quickly, and we can clean this up after. Just to block it in. Indication of the brow. So we've just been really sketchy with it here, but we've got those simple shapes. But the nose, again, everything is in 3 dimensions, okay? So I'm not gonna draw the nose like this, like front on. As soon as I start to understand that this object has a center line, you're probably going to see most of the nostril here. And this is what we use the reference for. We can see I see way more nostril over here than over here. And that starts to sit it in some form of reality. So beard. The beard, again, still 3D shape. We're going to see more of this side of the beard than the other side. Okay, so it also looks like it's kind of coming out of his nose. We can do more of a stylistic beard. Again, use the lasso tool, please. Do yourselves a favor. Move stuff around, experiment. It's a lot faster to do that. And you can get a quick feedback loop of what's looking good. What if I move the ear back here? That feels about right. Let's go with it. But if it didn't, it's just as easy just to go back and push it back the other way. Okay, so I'm gonna look at these negative shapes as well, of like where a little bit of the hair isn't growing as much. We can emphasize that a little bit more. And I think we're almost about time to knock it back and give a whirl at refining it a little bit more.
How do you decide between something's rough, but it's just in the early stages and you keep moving forward versus it looks rough, but it's because something seems off and I need to figure it out?
I think that's a personal choice because I see a lot of artists that like do rough stuff, but it's cool looking rough stuff. I think that's really up to you how far you want to push it and how finished you want the piece. Sometimes I'll just keep stuff rough and I might just start slapping color on this guy if I felt like it. If you're going to be painting on, at least this is just me, all right? So take this with a big pinch of salt. If I'm going to be painting on top of this, I want to have all of my shapes understood so I don't come to 3, 4, 5, 6 hours down the line and I don't know how this cheek sort of planes are working. I want this kind of all sorted out before I get to a place where I'm struggling and I've got to sort it out later on. And that's going to be different for different people, right? Some people, this could be enough. But if I was going to take this a little bit further and paint it all up, I'd want to go even a few more iterations than this. I might change things around. So it is kind of a personal preference kind of thing. The relationships between the shape features. So for example, because we've actually captured a tiny bit of likeness here. I'm not going for likeness, but just by putting the shapes in a certain position, it's kind of happened a little bit. So it's the relationships. So if I, for example, went and took this nose and I pushed it up really far, okay, it very quickly does not look like him. If I rounded his nose and made him a little goblin looking dude, it very quickly doesn't look like the guy, right? So it's just as important getting the shapes of this guy's nose. So I'm seeing this and I'm seeing triangle. I'm seeing like an arrow shape, and I'm seeing that it's quite large comparative to the rest of everything. It's kind of like a central feature. No offense to this guy, it's a compliment. It's a lovely nose. But also, yeah, it's the relationships between things, not just saying, okay, his nose is triangle. You could do that, but then you can make the nose super tiny.
So do you think it's better to decompose a shape into like CS and like straight curves?
Yeah, I think I might do that intuitively. I'm not thinking about that 100% like C, S, and I, but I do like to draw with a lot of straights and like semi-curves, I guess you could say. I'm not doing a whole lot of like really smooth, circular kind of lines. You might notice I'm going like here, and then I'll cut it off like that. And also with the teeth here, I like just making them look really like mangled for some reason. Like in a lot of my characters, they just got like weird, funky teeth. So what I do is I just think of them as separate shapes, right? So I almost think of them as this kind of shape, right? So you got, if you put a center line through the teeth, they're kind of going into one another. And then how extreme you want to take that is completely up to you from a stylistic standpoint. So, and then it's just adding the detail of the little gum triangles there. And here with the lower teeth, it's got a little snaggle tooth there, which we can add in. But yeah, you see as we're starting to refine it, getting a little bit of likeness. Wasn't the plan, but it's kind of like a nice happy accident. Again, the little 6 ear, it's a favorite of mine. Sometimes I do the little lightning bolt, you know, same thing. You can then make it a more fancy one where you add like the inner lip of the ear if you want, so it gives a little bit of dimension. But yeah, this is fun, throwing shapes around. And when it comes to hair as well, blocking it out into like a single shape is super helpful. Instead of going like strand by strand like I was doing scratchy before, as I'm refining, I think of this whole clump of hair as one shape. So we can sort of come here. And again, this is wrapping around the 3 dimensions of the head. It's not floating in space. It's coming to a point and it's kind of wrapping around. We can add a little bit of sideburn action here. And then with the facial hair, completely up to you how you want it to meld in with the face itself. You can just do little like tick marks there and then add it back in where it makes more sense to sort of add a harder line with the mustache here. So you can come through, actually almost have it like it's sculpted onto the face and add little shapes here. Completely up to you. This is why I recommend having style reference up when you're doing this kind of thing, because then you can see how other artists tackle this. How do they meld the facial hairs into the face? Try it out. It costs nothing.
Have you ever used your own art as style reference before?
I don't think I have actually. Unless I'm trying to get like maybe once or twice, but it's not a regular thing because I'm trying to get like inspired, you know what I mean? I don't know if like when I see my old work, I don't know if it's the same for you. Like from even like a couple of months ago, I'm like, oh, could have done this, could have done that, could have done this, could have done that. You know what I mean? It's tough. It's almost I don't want to look at it in a way. Get more of this nostril because he's kind of snarling. That can really give it more of an impact. Again, I'm using the reference for its simple shape, so I'm not trying to go in here and get every little tooth detail or anything like that. We're just having fun, throwing some shapes around. And again, thinking about the hair just as a block, just a big block of shape.
Ben, for your art journey and discovering your style, was it something you were deliberately moving towards from the beginning, or was it something that you just found yourself naturally gravitating for?
Back in the day, I did very realistic stuff. I was copying the reference one-to-one. I was getting every little detail, every little value change, everything, right? And about 2.5 years ago, I started to move away from that. I wanted to start understanding how to create characters for myself. How do I stylize? How do I get someone to look like someone, but it looks nothing like them, but it also looks more like the person than a photograph of the person? That just like blew my mind. So then I went on this like journey to try and figure out stylization, and some of these things that I'm sharing here is kind of what I've figured out along the way. But yeah, I wasn't always doing this. I kind of got burnt out on the realism stuff. And then here I've just found a real, a lot of freedom with the character stuff, with the stylized stuff, and understanding more so what I'm drawing rather than just copying and relying so heavily on the reference. Let's get another one going. Let's give this guy a shot, hey? So again, when I'm starting the head, the ears, so important. I can just throw down, I see this triangle shape, throw it down, triangle, weird ear shape. We've already got it to head direction. This is where I want to start. I might make his nose larger. Why? I don't know, because I feel like it. You know, there's no rhyme or reason, but we're still in kind of 2D land here. But one thing with the profile view, the eye, a lot of the times I see the eye really, really close to the front of the face. If you actually look at how far inset his eye actually is from the nose bridge, that's a big issue I used to have and still do sometimes. So I really want to be conscious of pushing that eye back into the head. And also a real quick tip, all the characters that I'm drawing, they all have necks. They're all connected to something. Very seldom are you drawing a head with just the jaw floating in space. The neck really grounds it for me, and it really helps with like here, like the direction of the head as well. So he's kind of looking down. It's a little bit concerned. Again, I'm going back and forth between this 2D and 3D thinking. I'm thinking about this, all right? I'm not necessarily drawing that, if that makes sense. Okay, so you just got to take that into account when you're watching others do their thing. All right, we can get a bit of the back in here, indication of the hand.
How does your workflow differ between working in traditional and working on digital?
Traditional, we don't have layers, all right? So I've got to be a little bit more specific about my decision making. I do some of this working out ahead of time in my head. Like I will, oftentimes if I'm using reference, I'll look a lot more at the reference than at what I'm drawing, because if I'm going back and forth and I'm just going slap down and drawing, and then before I know it, it's not looking how I want it to because I've kind of forgotten the reference. Whereas here, if I forget the reference, I can just erase it, new layer, go over the top, do this kind of thing, just knock it back, and then go again. So it's a little bit more deliberate because I'm also not that comfortable with traditional either. So it's something that I'm trying to learn as well.
You think it's important as an artist to be proficient at both digital and traditional?
I think it's as important as you want it to be. I like doing traditional because it's fun. You know, I don't think of it as a necessity that I have to do, and the worlds mix well together. Like mixing oil paint to get different colors versus color picking and doing that, you can understand a lot more when you're mixing oil paints and how colors actually work in the real world. And then you can bring that knowledge into digital. You can't so much do that the other way around. At least I've found a lot of things that clicked for me when I started working traditionally, when it came particularly to like color mixing and that sort of stuff. So I do think it's beneficial. Do I think you have to? No, but I think it's fun. And it's the same with sculpting as well. I love traditional sculpting. It's a heck of a lot of fun. Now with the hands, I like to lock them in as like groups, if that makes sense, like a group of shapes. That tends to work well. And then we've got the finger here, and then flipping back and forth, right? Making sure we're looking at it in different perspectives and finding center lines. Center lines are my best friend, that center line of the back, and pushing the shape as well. I'm not trying to get it one-to-one with the reference. And then just making some indications of some of the anatomy, but not going too crazy with it, you know? I'm not liking this eye, so you know what? We're just gonna get rid of it. I'm gonna try something different.
Ben, when you are dealing with a full body figure drawing like this, how much are you envisioning from the start how much you're going to skew the proportions, or how much of it is just discovering along the way?
A lot of it is discovering. If I was going to plan this out and have this as a full-on like figure study, I would probably, just like the face, the same principles apply. So I would look at this and say, okay, what shapes do I see? I see this kind of rectangular shape that sort of tapers in. I see this shape for the leg and then a triangle for the foot. And then I'd push those. I would expand them, contract them, and test a lot of things out. A lot of this stuff for me is iteration. It's not just like one and done. I mean, it's a very, very great day if I just sit down, draw something, and I'm like, sick, that's awesome. That never happens. It's always iterating, trying to sort of refine it, and always trying to find different ways to push stuff. Like even with this hair shape, why not just try different things, you know? But yeah, same principles apply with the anatomy here. And I do like to have that like sort of start-stop stroke, like with the shoulder here, it's like boom, boom. All right, maybe and this is another thing, if I had style reference open, maybe I'd look at some other artists and be like, all right, the hands might be a little larger. That might be cool. And I quite like that. Then we can refine them. Again, trying to keep all the shapes really simple. And hands, they're bloody tricky. It is the way it is sometimes. And again, these are just, I would classify these as more just sketches. We could then take these and do with them what we want. We can refine them further. We can just have these as first iterations of something. We can then go through and render it as far as we want. And how we're talking about 3D shapes, this I'm thinking about as a cylinder. You've probably all heard this before, but it's worth repeating. All these shapes can be broken down. It doesn't help me to be super complex in the beginning, otherwise I can get lost very, very easily. And what you can do, instead of being very explicit with like the cylinder that I'm drawing here, you can use clothing, you can use muscle shapes, you can use accessories as those wrapping lines. For example, he might have an armband. That's one way to show that the arm is coming back in space, you know? So you're kind of hiding those wrapping lines within the drawing itself, if that makes sense. And that's the fun of, yeah, understanding what your simple shapes are to begin with.
At what stage of your process do you usually introduce colors?
It really depends. I like to do the black and white to color process sometimes. After this phase, we could start to add some values. We could then use layer modes to then add color to these. So that would be at that point, I could add colors. I could also just start blocking in color here as well. So it really depends on what process I want to use, whether it's just straight up painting or if it's more of a systematic black and white to color process. Other than if I was just going to do it with line. As I was saying, I kind of see values a little bit clearer. So I might push them a little bit more, or they might even be a little bit more subdued, a little bit more subtle. One thing I do notice is when I end up rendering or end up adding color and values, I'll oftentimes change a whole lot of the line work. And then I go back to the line work, what it was, and then what the final rendering was. There's night and day. I've like changed things around, eye directions, eye shapes, that kind of thing. So it's very malleable. So I could even do the same if I started off with painting. I'd start off with the painting, do line work over the top of it after to correct things as well. So it's kind of interchangeable for me. So hopefully you can even see here that the shapes that I'm putting down are resembling the reference, even at this really, really simple stage. Again, thinking about the eyes as spheres within the eye sockets, always thinking about the eyes as spheres. All right, so this could be a good time to knock it back, and then we refine.
When you are doing these portraits based on reference, do you ever find yourself falling in love with the design that you've created and then like making that a full character, a fully fleshed out character?
Yeah, sometimes. Okay. Sometimes I experiment with them and then I sort of say, okay, what would she look like with like different expressions and that kind of, that happens quite often actually, yeah. Yeah, no, it's good fun because then you start playing, you start stylizing, it's no longer just the reference. You can then turn it into whatever character that you want. Like maybe she's more like sci-fi, got like a helmet or something, you know what I mean? You can do anything that you want. This is just freedom. Now, one thing with the lips as well. So again, we're thinking in 3D. So this is going to overlap. We're not actually going to see the corner of the mouth. You can't really see it here, but these arcs of the lip are going to be tracking back to that. All right. So I'm always, again, thinking in 3D, going back and forth, trying to find logic in the shapes that I'm making, particularly with this 3/4 view. We want to make sure that the eyes, particularly the far eye, is feeling like it's sitting where it's meant to, inside the sockets. All right, so I might even push that back just a tad.
When it comes to placing features, do you have any particular systems that you kind of learned from? Did you use a Loomis, Riley, any rhythm systems you kind of started with and then built your own? How do you maintain that placement of features on the far side of the face?
I use a combination plus my own sort of lines. The Riley, I enjoyed Steve Hampton, his way of construction. Steve Houston as well, particularly like the whistle method of like understanding the kind of eye sockets in like a simple way. So you could think of this as like a whistle kind of thing. Like that helps sometimes. So it is also like on a case by case basis, like what's going to be useful to me at any given time and any given head angle as well. Like it's all dependent on the end goal that I'm after. Yeah, man, go for it.
Is there anything that you try to change every time you approach a new portrait or a new piece? Like, are you consciously trying to push your own stylization? And like, where do you push it?
It's a bit hard with this one, but we could try it here. The expression, giving her a bit more attitude, which is always fun. You know, just with that eyebrow there, completely changed the whole vibe of her expression, you know? And seeing how I can still keep it simple, you know? Really trying to push the expressions, add character to it. Depends how I'm feeling as well. Maybe I just go like crazy with the proportions and just do like whatever with the shapes and see if I can get myself out of some trouble. And one thing I've been playing around with as well is like texturing with the line work. So instead of just doing a flat, straight, just boom, 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 boom like that, actually taking the time to come through and add some texture to the line work. And also thinking about the direction of where this texture is going to go, because it's not always just going to be in the same direction. And again, how do you figure this out? Get that style reference up. Look at artists that are doing something similar that you like the look of. And you're going to be a lot more motivated to try and figure it out. So just doing this kind of cross-hatchy sort of thing just keeps it a little bit more interesting. Instead of just doing flat colors, you could be as delicate with this as you like. And just refining the eye just a little bit. Making sure that the eyeball is inset from the eyelid. And we can even come through and clean it up with the lasso tool.
In that refinement, do you work in stages, or do you kind of limit the time you work on a piece, put it away and come back to it, or do you just kind of go all the way through until you've completed it?
It might be a good idea to put a time limit on it, because sometimes I'll just do a full day of like iteration. It's not a bad idea to put a time limit on it, but in reality for me, it's like, is it looking good? Is it looking how I want it? No, keep going with it, you know? And I've had to completely change whole pieces 6, 7, 8, 9 hours deep because it just wasn't looking right, which is why having a lot of this setup and this understanding of these shapes really helps at this early stage. So yeah, what I've shown you today is really how I start an illustration with these sketches, with the simple shapes, using photo reference but not sticking to the photo reference, and really showing you why I love 3D, like thinking in 3D. Because it gives me ultimate freedom to make up whatever I want. I like this stylized stuff, so I draw this stylized stuff. If I want it a little bit less stylized and a little closer to the reference, I can do that as well, because I've got the understanding of those 3D forms, if that makes sense. There's a lot of fun. Thanks, guys.
There's more to learn from Ben Eblen's premium lessons at proko.com/Ben Eblen. In his course, Illustrating a Stylized Character, Ben goes over his process for a full figure illustration, tackling his start to finish process. You even get his 3D models and an ebook guide to figure drawing. In the Proko Digital Painting Fundamentals course, Ben joins us as a guest instructor to cover his digital techniques when illustrating portraits. And Ben has a really interesting process coloring his pieces. He uses a tool he developed called the Filthy Photoshop plugin. And if you want to get filthy yourself, go check out all his stuff on proko.com/Ben Eblen.